things don't always go the way you planned. And as a coach, you're like, okay, how can I still use this to better my athlete? Because you could win a fight and not be better. Did you execute anything that we prepared to do? You like don't consider that a win. That was not a win. A win looks like when you get in the ring and all the things you've prepared and practiced, you're able to execute. That's a win.
Hi, welcome to the Growth Mixtape Podcast, and I'm your host, Bob Mathers. We have one rule here. We're going to chase our curiosity way outside our comfort zones. The more uncomfortable and awkward, the better. We're going to talk to people you've never heard of doing jobs you didn't know existed. We're going to hear human stories about the things that connect us, what we can learn from one another, and what we can take away to apply to our own lives. These conversations might not seem to have a lot in common at first, but just like songs on a mixtape, they create something memorable and emotional. Today we talk to Syd the Jewel Vanderpool, former boxer with a pro record of 35-4 with 23 knockouts. He was super middleweight champion, and he did what virtually no boxers do. He walked away at the top of his game. He now owns his own boxing gym, coaches Olympic athletes, and works with business leaders to take what he learned in the ring to help them build thriving businesses of their own. It's hard to believe as I sit here in this comfy leather chair that Syd and I are the same species. He had his first fight when he was 6 years old and spent his life getting in the ring with trained killers. I've been in 2 fights in my life and they did not go well. And I pretty much spent the rest of my life avoiding conflict. But as Syd says, boxing isn't about fighting. It's about discipline, resilience, and knowing when to stand your ground. And that hit me right between the eyes. Syd's got incredible stories from inside and outside the ring, and he is a wisdom soundbite machine. Here are 2 I cannot get out of my head. 1, if you don't believe in yourself, no amount of training, coaching, or preparation will save you. At some point, you have to decide you belong. And number 2, if you never feel like an imposter, you're not pushing yourself hard enough. Man, this conversation really hit home. Please enjoy Syd Vanderpool. All right, Syd Vanderpool, welcome to the show.
Hey Bob, thanks so much for having me, man.
You know, I've been thinking about this episode. And I'm like, what is it that I'm so excited about? Because I've had some pretty high-end athletes on here, and I'm like, yeah, what is it? And I think it comes down to this, man. I was born in '70. I grew up in the era of like Ali, Frazier, Foreman, and Tyson and Holyfield and Lewis. And I grew up watching all the Rocky films. Like they were my favorite movies growing up. I think I was probably 8 years old when the first one came out. And so it's occurred to me, I've never actually talked to anybody that's been in the ring, that has spent their life kind of training and coaching. And there's just so much about that world that is so different from anything I've experienced. So I just have a million questions.
Amazing. Yeah, I mean, you just named off like some of those fighters that you named off, and of course the Rocky movies. I mean, my kids grew up watching Rocky movies. I mean, people put on cartoons, I put on the Rocky movies, and that's what they watch. So I'm excited to have a conversation with you and see where it goes.
Yeah, I was kind of fantasizing. I was thinking whether I could pull off like in this corner we have Syd the Jewel Vanderpool. I don't know how long it's been since you heard that, but that's a pretty cool nickname. Where did that come from?
Yeah. So that came a little later, like midway through my career. I had a pro fight in, I believe it was New Orleans, and I went in there and I don't remember who I fought, but I went in there and I knocked this guy out in like 5 rounds. And as I was walking through the crowd, this old guy's like, "Ho ho, you punch like a mule!" And my manager at the time was making fun. He's like, "Syd the Mule Vanderpool, ha ha ha!" And he's just making fun. And so he went home. My manager went home and told his daughter the story and how the guy was calling me the mule. And she was just like, Dad, like, why not Syd the Jewel? I mean, a jewel is a precious stone. It's formed under pressure. That so much represents Syd. And he came back and he said to me, how about Syd the Jewel Vanderpool? And I was like, it rhymes. And I like it. And I became Syd the Jewel Vanderpool.
Yeah, it stuck. And the mule is an ass.
Yes.
So
Sometimes my wife calls me that, but
of course. Well, I want to step back, Jewel. Jewel, I want to step back, Syd, because
I love me. Don't go ahead. Just call me
yeah,
Jewel, man.
wander between those two things. I love that.
Okay, that's cool.
So you had your first fight at 6, and I'd love to hear how that came about.
Yeah, so I have four older brothers, and my dad was our boxing coach. He was the first one that got us started into boxing. And my brothers were being bullied at school, so he's like, you know what? Let me teach them boxing. So he started teaching us some boxing, and he then figured out that we could actually go into different fights and competitions. So he bought a van, and we would just travel around in this van to different cities, Drumbo and Brantford and Stratford, and wherever there was a boxing match, the Vanderpool boys would show up and get in the ring. And so there was this one event happening in Toronto, and Vince Bagnetto, he's gone now, but Vince Bagnetto was a famous boxing promoter in Toronto, and he had an amateur show going on, and I was just there, got in the van, got in the back room, and one of my brothers was fighting, and so I'm sitting there, and I just wanted to be around them. I just, I was just in awe of these guys that got in the ring and boxed, and they were my brothers. And so I'm sitting in the back room, I'm just watching, and Vince Bagnetto opens up this door to the dressing room. And back then, everyone was smoking cigars and smoking, and all the smoke just piled into the dressing room. And here comes Vince, and Vince is like, "Hey, I don't have enough fights tonight. Does anybody else have anyone else who could fight?" And my dad just looked at me, and he pointed, and he goes, "He'll fight." And I'm like thinking to myself, I'm just here to watch. And I look up, and my dad's pointing at me. And Vince says, "Okay, get him ready." And so my dad just went and grabbed my brother's, shorts, and they hung down to like my ankles, and they put these boxing gloves on me. And I started walking out into the smoke-filled room, just walking through this crowd of people, and they're like cheering and they're going crazy. And I remember walking up the stairs and up the stairs and looking through the ropes. As I'm looking through the ropes, the other boy's standing in the ring, and he was quite tall, like tall. And so I get in the ring, and I'm thinking to myself, I can fight him, or I look back at my dad, I could fight him. I'm like, I think I choose that boy. So I just got in there and I started throwing punches, and I won my first fight at 6.5 years old, and that boy was 9. I remember it, especially because my dad bought me he made me a trophy, and he also got me a plaque. It's actually still up on the wall behind me there. I got that little plaque where, it says that I won my first fight.
My kids are, kind of in their early 20s now, but I do remember, being the dad of a 6-year-old. And there is no doubt that if I came home from like an event and told my wife that our 6-year-old kid was in the ring, I would be living in a van by the river in minutes. So what was it like? How was your mother involved in all of this?
It's funny you say that. And because the other day, as I was going through some old stuff, I found this, and it's a coaching card, and it is my mom. So guess what? My mom was involved too. She was one of the coaches. So my mom was a coach, and she'd come along and she would support the clan.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, as I said, there's so much about kind of that boxing world that I don't understand. So as an amateur, you had 90 wins and 11 losses. So that's over 100 fights. So, just give me an inside peek at what that amateur circuit is like. Are you training in boxing? You must be fighting what, every week or every couple weeks, or what's that like?
Yeah. So, and again, it has changed from when I was growing up and coming through boxing. Yeah, we were pretty much boxing every weekend. And also at that time, like for a tournament, you could box more than one time in the same day. You could box 2 times in the same day. So that is no longer a thing. You can only box once every 24 hours. Every weekend we would just go to different events. And if they didn't have enough fights or a fight fell through, we would always walk with all of our boxing gear. And we would just, oh, we'll fight. And we would just get in the ring and we would just, have a competition. It's just something more that we did. We just enjoyed doing it. And now it's very much like when boxers are boxing, it's like, oh, they're building a record. They're building, they're trying to get to a certain place. We were just doing it because we like to do it, and we like the competition. And it just so happened that it happened every weekend, and we got really good at it. But it was more just to compete, so more so than to, oh, these are the steps we need to take to get to here. We didn't do that. We were just like getting in the ring and just fighting.
So do you have a trainer or a manager, or is that just your dad or your older brothers? Or because I know at some point you have to decide, or you decided, okay, train the Olympics or go pro. Like at some point, as you get closer to that kind of fork in the road, do you build a team around you?
Yeah, so in the amateurs, it's really just you're an amateur, you have your coach, and you have your like training team with your strength and conditioning, nutrition, that sort of thing. But you don't have a manager or promoter or that sort of thing. It's only when you decide that you maybe want to take it to the professional level that you'll then look to get a manager and a promoter and these sorts of things. So that's the business. Once you're ready, like, okay, I want to make this a business. Now, okay, now you better put a business team together. But up until then, you're fighting for medals and trophies, and you just have a coach.
So how old are you when you turn pro?
So I'm 19. So yeah, at 19 years old was when I made the decision because I'd lost the Olympic trials. I finished second at the Olympic trials, so I could wait another 4 years to try and win an Olympic medal, get a gold medal, or go pro and get a gold Mercedes. And I was like, hey, I want a gold Mercedes, so I decided to turn pro.
Did you ever get that Mercedes?
It was like a gold Lexus. I got the
Okay.
Lexus. It was almost gold. Yeah.
Yeah, well, so as a pro, I think 35 wins, 23 knockouts, 4 losses. You alluded earlier to you don't necessarily remember every fight. Do you remember every pro fight? And I guess I'm wondering, what do you take? What are there ones that stood out, and what did you learn from those?
Oh my gosh. So you remember every fight for a different reason, but it may not be for what you think. So I fought this guy from Detroit. His name was Joel White Boy Stevenson. I probably have like 19 or 20 pro fights by now, so I'm pretty good. And we fight him at this casino. And I don't know, I was beating him. I was beating him pretty handily. It was competitive, but I'm ahead. And for some reason, he decides in the clinch that he wants to kiss me on the cheek. He kisses me on the cheek. And I that's never happened to me before. And I'm very cool, calm, and collected. And I remember going like, what? And I just went like, I got a little bit of rage. I was, why'd you kiss me? Right. And so I remember getting kissed by Joe White Boy Stevenson, so that was memorable. I remember the first time I ever got knocked down, and that was my first fight in Canada because most of my fights were in the US. I remember it was a fight that I should win handily. And, I sold lots of tickets. It's in front of my fans and everybody. And I got a little cocky. And next thing I knew, I was like on the ground. I told everybody I was tying my shoe, but, I got dropped. And I got back up. And I remember he hit me with a jab. Because the first thing I do when I get knocked down, I get up and I'm like, okay, what did I get hit with? Because if I can figure that out, then I'm not going to get hit with that same punch again. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure it was either a hook or a right hand. And he came and he hit me with a jab. And I was like, oh my Lord, that felt like a right hand. That hurt so much. And I remember in that moment, I had a decision to make. I was like, okay, the next time he hits me, I can just fall down and not get back up. Or I can try and make it through this round, go back to my corner, and we'll see what happens. And I never mentally made the decision. I just went on and kept fighting, right? So for me, that was a telling moment because it, you never give up, da, 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 da. Like no, I've been there, man. I've been there, and I had over 100, probably up to 140 fights at that time. It's a scary place. There's all these mantras and all these things are being thrown at people, and it's like, oh, I'm invincible. Yeah, but believe me, when you get hurt, and things go through your mind. And I've been there and I've experienced it. So now I know how to talk to my fighters when they're with these questions and these sorts of things.
Yeah, man, that's amazing. I definitely want to bookmark that and come back to that. You bring up something that I've always wondered about boxing. So in these pro fights, I'm sure you've got, I don't know, you've got a few weeks to train and prepare. You
Hmm.
study your opponent, you know what their strengths are, their weaknesses. You come up with a plan, and then you get and you train for weeks and get ready for that. And then you get in the ring, and then you realize, oh, they also have a strategy. They've thought about how I'm going to prepare, and you must have to adjust not only early in the ring, but the it probably changes as the fight goes on. So what's that like?
Yeah, it's amazing. It is so great. It's again, it's a chess match
Mm-hmm.
because you have a strategy. You're gonna come out, David. So what my coach would do was he would look at my fights and he would say, okay, if I was gonna fight Sid, what would I do? And then he would try and prepare me to be like, okay, this is probably what they're gonna try and do. So we'd have that game plan. Then we'd have on, okay, using your best skill set, what are you going to do against this person right now? What would you do? So I left it to my coach. I was like, listen, you just tell me what I need to do and I'll do it. Because I'm trying to think about plan A, plan B, plan C. Now I'm overthinking. For me, the best thing for me to do is just to go in there and perform and execute the skills that I've done over and over and over again. So I practice the skills and I take direction from my coach. Easy, simple, and that's how we do victory. That's how we achieve so many victories. And he would say to me like, "Don't throw the left hand right now." I'm like, "Okay," and he goes, "Okay, it's time to get him out. Throw the left hand." And I go and I do it, and I get him out. I go, "Okay, we go home now." Yeah, we go home now. All right, great, let's go. Like, that's
Yeah, you're right. It's like any sport that a casual fan like me would look at, like any sport. You have no idea what's actually happening, like how much strategy to 99% of people out there is just two guys beating the hell out of each other. You know, like you don't realize how much thought and strategy has gone into it and all the prep that's gone into that.
yeah, because like you said, not only do they have strategies, they've been training these to execute these moves over and over and over again. So they're highly skilled with their movements. You've got conditioning like cardio. You've got people who everybody's got some sort of injury going on. There's a little bit injury. You've got the mental pressure of the
Mhm.
crowd. Maybe you had a fight with your wife. Like there's all these things that are happening. And that's what makes it so amazing when on that day, on that one given moment, you know, that one person brings their best at that day in that moment. It's just, yeah, it's incredible. I love being part of it.
Yeah, well, I'm so excited to get to how that experience has informed, all the coaching that you do now. Before I do that, you've talked a bit about boxing and what that world is like. What's the biggest misconception you think most people have about boxing?
I think that boxing is brutal. When I think of brutality, I think about just senseless violence. It's just brutal. I mean, I wouldn't want to be a part of something that's brutal. Boxing takes so much finesse. It's an art. Like when it's done at its best, and you understand again, I'm not a painter, and I see a painting, and I'm like, okay, that's nice. But for a painter, the way the colors have been blended, the way that they've, decided to use this color here, like I'm sure there's so much involved in the painting that makes it such like
Hmm.
I can't even begin to understand it. But it's the same thing with boxing. Like when you understand the movements and the feints and the angles and how things are being set up for one person to land one punch, it's like you're like, wow, this is such an art.
Yeah. I do get the sense, like I said, I know that there's a lot more going on than my novice brain can comprehend, but I do get the feeling there is a lot of artistry to it that is kind of, hidden from the casual fan. That's so interesting. So I before we get to the coaching side, because I mean I could I could talk about this all day long. I'm sure you've got some amazing fight stories. One of the things I wanted to talk about was when you decided to end your career and what that was like, because I do feel like, at least I growing up, I always got the sense that most boxers usually hung in there for two or three fights too long, right? And these guys that were were just legends ended up just kind of being sad, versions of themselves, and everybody wishes that they had just kind of quit earlier, but nobody seemed to do it. You seem to have gone out kind of pretty close to the top of your game.
Yeah. So again, one of the things that I love doing is I like connecting with people, and and just asking questions and just finding out more. And so, whenever I was fighting and being in different environments, I talked to people. And I remember talking to this one guy about retirement. And he said, Sid, here's the thing. When your career, and this was very early on, he said, when your career is no longer going like this and starts to go like this, that's probably the best time to get out of the game. And that stuck with me.
Mm.
And so I was 5 in, so I lost my sixth professional fight. All right, that was it, sixth professional fight. And then I went 6.5 years without a loss. And then after I had that loss against Hopkins, I had two more losses within an 18-month period. So I had a lot of losses in a short period of time. And I was just like, hold on a second here. Like I know I still can do I can still do but I'm like I'm looking at the math. I'm like, how do you go so long without a loss and all of a sudden you have three losses back to back, very close together? And I was like, I think it's time to go and do something else. I don't want my body or an injury to tell me it's time to do something else. I just want to make a decision to do something else. And so I just made the decision. It's time to do something else. And I retired.
Why do you think it's so hard for most boxers to take that kind of thoughtful approach to it and hang in there for a few too many fights?
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak for, I mean, everyone's going to have their own reasons, whether it's financial, I mean, I think one of my gifts too is perspective. My purse minimums were going to be $10,000. So the least I could fight for was $10,000. I'm fighting trained killers for $10,000. No, sir. There is a lot easier ways to make money, and so it was not money. I'm like, I'm not fighting for money. I think boxers could I go on and still win fights? I think I could. I really think I could have went on, and that's why I think most because they're like I could get back, I could get back, but at what expense?
Yeah, man. Oh my God, 10 grand. That definitely puts it in perspective. It's interesting, Sid, as you talk about that. I mean, it's as I said, our worlds are very different. But as I'm in my early 50s now, and so me and all my friends are sort of looking down the barrel of retirement, and some of us have been doing the same thing for 20 or 30 years. And so the parallel is that it is scary. Um, maybe not as scary as getting in the ring with trained killers, but when you've only known one thing and it's part of your identity, the idea of that ending, it's like you really better have something to run to instead of just kind of stepping over this retirement cliff. Maybe that is part of the perspective that you had that some others didn't, is that you had other things to do.
Yeah, I would agree with that totally. Like if you only invested in one thing and that was your identity, and you never thought about anything else besides that, beyond that, then yeah, it's gonna be very tough to put that away.
Yeah.
That's something that a perspective I bring to my athletes. So as we're doing this, we also need to consider and build on this because we don't want to get to that point where it's like, okay, well, I've got nothing else to go to.
Yeah. Okay, before we get into the coaching, I've got to ask this because this is something that I've talked to my friends about. I really don't have an answer for, and you, as somebody from inside the sport, would have a different perspective on it. So, as I said, I grew up in the '70s, man. Like the biggest celebrities in the world were, Ali and Foreman and Frazier. They were global, celebrities across the world, and I can tell you that honestly, now I don't think I could name one boxer. So as somebody from inside the sport, like what has happened to boxing as a popular sport? Because it's really not as big a part of the popular conversation as it used to be.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's many reasons for it, and I think one of them is that the other sports have stepped up their game as well. And you look at football and you
Mm,
look at basketball, like they've just really done a good job, and even the UFC. People always talk about the UFC. I mean, like just marketing machines, whereas boxing just had its thing, and the industry just sat on what it had. The boxers are still getting paid like tremendous amounts of money. And each promoter's individual. They're like, the promoters are still making money. They're like, why should we worry about getting this, promoting boxing back on network television? Like we're just go to Dubai and, and make, big bags of money. And so it's not as the notoriety is not as much as it used to be,
Yeah.
and also the pay-per-views, right? Boxing became a pay-per-view sport. It's like, okay, if you want to watch it, you got to pay for it.
Yeah.
So yeah, again, only if you were a boxing fan were you going to pay that $75.
Yeah, there's some really valuable lessons there for kind of business leaders, right? It's not that the sport has gone away, because if you ask most people, they would say, "Yeah, I don't know, is boxing even a thing?" I mean, it comes up at the Olympics, and when Jake Paul decides to fight somebody, it bubbles up and then it disappears again. So it's still there, but it's more of a uh, kind of a niche sport that's
Yeah.
still massive in certain parts of the world and certain communities. It's just not as part of the popular conversation as it used to be. Hey, it's Bob, and I'm taking the Growth Mixtape on the road in a series of keynote speeches inspired by the stories of my amazing guests. At their core, these signature talks are about how to get you and your teams off autopilot and stop settling for small incremental improvements. This isn't going to come from spewing business advice. My podcast is full of people that have done incredible things, and every one of them struggles with self doubt, imposter syndrome, and the crippling fear of judgment that holds so many of us back. They've also found ways through it by rediscovering their creativity, their curiosity, and the confidence to do scary things. Imagine the power of bringing these vulnerable stories to life, live and on stage, to help you and your teams hit your targets, find your voice, and be the rock stars you are. Book me for your next event at bobmathers.ca. Now back to the show. So, yeah, let's talk about this coaching. It's so interesting. So, you go from somebody that's obviously relied on coaches during your boxing career. Then you become a boxing coach, and now you're actually coaching gym leaders on how to be business owners. So such an amazing transformation. So if we just start at the beginning part of that, how did you get involved in coaching, and what's the part of that that you've taken away that surprised you the most? Like what didn't you expect about that coaching that you've gotten out of it?
Yeah. So coaching at I'm going to say at all levels. I was going to say at the highest levels, like coaching like an Olympian or a professional, is a little bit different than coaching someone who just wants to improve their fitness and learn some boxing skills. I was going to say it's different. The intensity is different, but the delivery is the same.
Hmm.
So let's say you want to come in and you want to learn boxing because you just want to learn your discipline, you want to get great shape. I'm going to take you through the same regimen in terms of, okay, well, what are you doing for nutrition? What's your strength like? Strength training like? What's your sleep like? Okay, here are the fundamental basics we need to work on. Okay, we're going to do that 3 days a week. And I'm going to check in on you and hold you accountable to doing these things. Perfect. Now, if you're an Olympian, we're doing the same things, but I'm checking on you 6 days a week. So it's the same, the structure is the same. It's just the intensity of it is going to change a little bit. All right. And that's one of the things that I love about coaching is once you understand the fundamentals and the pillars, you can coach any athlete.
So what are those pillars?
So you've got your physical, your mental, your emotional, and then nutrition. And I didn't understand about the emotional until probably like maybe like 2 years ago. I
Hmm.
just thought it was mental. One of our members, Dr. Kim Dawson, she helps with the sports psychology with a lot of our athletes. One of the things was she talked about, someone's emotional intelligence in the ring. So sometimes I have athletes that are mentally ready, but they're not emotionally ready. And so I have to work on the emotional capacity because that can affect a lot in the ring. How can you emotionally handle the moment? Mentally, they think they can handle it, but then something happens, triggers, and now it becomes emotional. Once emotions involved, the mental capacity doesn't even matter
Hmm.
anymore. So you have to be able to control emotional regulation, you call that.
Interesting. So you can be mentally ready but not emotionally ready. So does that mean like like coming back to your fear comment, like does fear come up, or like what are the how does that emotional regulation get in the way of performing?
For me, I find this a lot with my younger athletes. understanding that, Sid, yeah, you can put them in a situation that they're mentally ready, but if they're not emotionally ready, they're not going to do well. How will that affect performance? Usually it shows up in belief. They don't believe in themselves. As soon as that non-belief happens, I can try to, all right, you don't believe in yourself. I believe in you. Just believe in my belief, and we'll get through this. That only works so many times, and especially if they lose, because every time they lose, then it's like, oh no, like coach believed in me, but that didn't really help. If I believe in you and you win, then we can start to transfer, and your belief starts to become your belief. But so yeah, it's challenging, and I'm still working through it.
Yeah, it's interesting that somebody, with your pedigree and your experience can go through an entire career and then and later on, realize, oh, there's this kind of pillar that I've never thought about before. Does it make you go back and look at like, yeah, I had never thought about emotional, but it actually explains this, and this that might have happened to me.
Yeah, yeah, I do. As I uncover things, I go back and I'm like, oh, okay, I
Yeah.
see. And the funny thing is, sometimes it will be somebody may have said something to me and I brushed them off. Emmanuel Stewart, when he was coaching me at the time, he's like, Sid, you got a lot going on right now. You got a lot going on. He goes, you might want to put some of those things aside for the moment and just kind of focus on this. I was like, Manny, I'm different than most people, man. I can do it all, man. How many world champions have you trained? 25? Come on, brother.
Yeah, we all like to think that we're different or unique, and we're just all humans with the same wiring, and it shows up in different ways, but yeah, we're all 99% the same wiring.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure.
I want to come back to this idea of fear that you talked about, Sid, because man, that just comes up in so many of my conversations with business leaders. And it's very different than the fear you described of getting in the ring, I think, but it's kind of fear of judgment, fear of failure. So how does that fear kind of show up in when you're coaching people, and how do you help people overcome it?
Yeah. So they'll go into the ring with a certain amount of confidence, and if their opponent starts to push back, and challenge them to a point where it becomes hard, they'll start to back down and break. And so that's one way that it shows up, and it's a fear of like, oh my gosh, like, am I not good enough?
Hmm.
And then it just spirals, and it breaks my heart a little bit to watch that because
Right.
that's something that's happening internally within them, within their heart, with their mind, right? They're like kind of giving up on themselves, right? So, but I can sense it and I can see it. And so if I can get them back into the fight, great. And hey, you powered through. This is the moment. These moments happen to everybody. Like that's the moment where you showed yourself. Things don't always go the way you planned. And as a coach, you're like, okay, how can I still use this to better my athlete? If every opportunity you have, whether it's a win, loss, whatever, they have to come out better. And so many times, especially with the wins, 'cause you could win a fight and not be better. Did you execute anything that we prepared to do? You like don't consider that a win. That was not a win. A win looks like when you get in the ring and all the things you've prepared and practiced, you're able to execute. That's a win.
Man, there's so much about that I love, Sid, and it does strike me too that this fear of not being good enough, and can that survive the resistance, whether it's, people talking about you online or responding in comments or somebody punching you in the face. It shows up in different ways, but man, that fear of not being enough or fear of being judged is kind of at the heart of what holds so many of us back.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And what do they call that? Imposter syndrome, right?
Yeah.
You have to suffer from that, I believe, because if you're trying to grow, you don't know if you're good enough yet. How do you know? You don't know. And if you already know you're good enough, then you're not reaching high enough. Like there's so many things that I'm attempting right now. I don't know if it's gonna work. I don't know if I'm good enough. I believe I am, but I don't know because I haven't done it. So, and that's really how I want to live my life. There's so many things that I just don't know, and I'm like, good. That means I'm moving in the right direction.
Yeah. No kidding. I love that. Imposter syndrome is a signal that you're pushing yourself outside your comfort zone and doing something that, yeah, you believe you can do it, but because you've never done it, of course you're worried that, you're just kidding yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, I really love that. It's funny. We've lived in the same town, I think, for most of our lives, Sid, but we've never crossed paths. And you were involved in an event, this Champion for Charity program. The reason that was so interesting is it's probably the first time in my life it was like, you know what? I'm in my early 50s. I wonder if boxing would, again, help me get out of my comfort zone, because my initial reaction to that is, that sounds terrifying to me. I mean, I do running and I work out and everything, but just I'm not so sure it's the fear of getting punched in the face. It's just like I can't imagine how much this training would hurt compared to everything else I've done. And I'm just wondering, like, if somebody was at my age, what would your advice be to getting started with boxing?
You go to sitforhealth.ca and there's
Yeah.
a contact us. You click no. If you're thinking about it, just try it out because it's not just the physical. Like I said, there's the whole mental aspect. It develops your mental resilience, all these things that that some other things activities won't do. Boxing does that, and you get to do with other people. You don't have to get to where you want to punch people, but just learning the discipline and the repetition of the skills and improvement, it'll definitely add something to your life. So yeah, I say just try it.
What do you think it offers that other sports don't? Like, for example, I could go get a personal trainer or I could go to CrossFit. What am I going to get at boxing that I'm not going to get anywhere else?
Yesterday I had Mandy Bujold uh, in the gym, two-time Olympian, and then I had another boxer from Champions of Charity. He's going to have his first fight on April 4th, and I got him in the ring with Mandy Bujold. How often are you going to be able to go and train with a two-time Olympian, with somebody like boxing allows for that community of all levels. Like I couldn't go and go and skate on the ice with Mario Lemieux or anyone like that. Right? It just doesn't happen. I think that's why also they have the Rock Steady program for Parkinson's. The system of boxing and the repetition of skills, the breathing, everything. It helps you actually not only build muscle density, but it also helps your mind. It's just an all around great sport.
Yeah, I'm going to seriously consider that. And I mentioned it, you alluded to it too. Tell me about this Champion for Charity program, because that sounds pretty cool, and that's something seriously that I'm going to look into for next year.
Yeah, so McMaster Children's Hospital, that is the main sponsor or donor that we're donating money to. And there's a couple of local ones as well. And this was started 5 years ago by Mandy Bujold. And we had a chat, and she's retiring and she wanted to do something for the community because this community has done so much for her and for a lot of athletes. And she's like, I want to give back. And so, we talked about, how we could do that. And she thought about this event. And basically, we just take, 20 individuals, so the red team and a blue team, anybody in the community, and they raise money individually, and then we sell tickets. And I think the first year she raised, I want to say $200,000, and then last year we did 360,000. And I think right now we're at about $420,000 raised so far. So we'll do $500,000 this year, and it's just a great event for a community. And the individuals get to train for 13 weeks, and most of them have never done boxing before in their life. And I always hear at the end, "Changed my life." Just it changes your life. And I think the older you are, the bigger it will change your life. You have a pattern, you have a belief of where you are, and when you come, you're like, I never believed I could do that. And it just shows you again, like, wow, even at this age, I can be better. And then they just take that and run with it, and that's why I love it so much.
So, me, for example, I could is there might be a tryout or something, but I'm put on team red or team blue, and then I train with like the group and a trainer for 13 weeks, and then what? I get in the ring for a match or two, or is that how it works?
You get in the ring for a sanctioned, yeah, a real sanctioned amateur bout, and it's packed. I've been to a lot of pro shows, and it beats some of these pro shows. There's a red carpet. There's like fireworks when you come in. There's like cameras. It always gets sold out. It's sold out, but it's phenomenal. It's been at the Tapestry Hall this year, and last year, and I mean, if you've ever been to Tapestry Hall, I mean, it's phenomenal.
Man, if I listed my biggest fears, fear of judgment, fear of getting punched in the face, fear of getting hurt, this would check all those boxes, which is actually what's so attractive about it. To have it get in the ring and to have the chance to train with people and to, like you said, to prove that, yeah, you're not too old for this shit. Like, I'm 54. Man, there's probably 70-year-olds that could do it.
Oh, you're perfect, man. You're perfect. And for me, the most humbling and rewarding thing is these people are coming from an area of expertise. So they are like the top. They're like the top 2, 3% in their field. And now they're going to something where they're out of their comfort zone. Now let's like
Yeah,
it's gold. It's so good. It's so good.
you're right. Yeah, take people that are like giants of their industry and take them out of their comfort zone where everybody's the same
Yeah, everybody's the same.
and put them through the same program.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Wow, I love that. One last thing I wanted to ask you about. So, I've been following some of your content on LinkedIn, and you're actually working with gym owners, I think, to coach them through how to build a successful gym. So I'd love to hear what that's like, and sort of what are the lessons when you were starting out, or things you wish you had known that are kind of part of this program.
So the Boxing Gym Growth Academy, I talked to my business coach, Matt Sims at Leadership, and he's like, man, like I've had this idea for a long time, Matt. Like if it's crazy and and you want me just to stay focused on what I'm doing right now, you just tell me. But if you think this is a good idea, then can we partner on this? I originally when I opened up Boxing by Sid, so at first we were Boxing by Sid. I said I wanted to see like boxing by Roy Jones, boxing by Muhammad Ali if he was alive. Like when boxers retire, they have all this knowledge, all these skills, but they don't have the business sense, and that's what takes them down. I want to be able to take what I've learned and be able to give that to boxers that are retiring so they can go to their community and just do good stuff. And he's like, yeah, let's do it. And so that's pretty much it, is just being able to help boxing gyms have the systems in place so they can grow. Because the more they grow and the more they prosper, the more they're gonna benefit their communities. And that's really the main reason we started, and that's kind of what we're working on.
Man, there's so much about that I love, Sid, and it does come back to this idea of retirement, because I sense this and I talk to people all the time. It's like you get to a certain, whether you're a boxer or whatever you've been doing, and whether you're 40 or 50, you get to this point where you feel like, okay, I've done all these amazing things and I've got this pile of skills. What am I going to do with it for the next 10 or 15 years? Like, how can I put these things together in a unique way to offer, to come up with a new career, to do something that maybe is different than anybody else could do? And it's hard to do on your own, right? Because we don't realize, first of all, how great we are and all the skills that we've amassed. But sometimes we need somebody to take all that and just help shape it based on, for example, the experiences that you've had and the mistakes that you've made, and be like, man, if I had just made this one thing, if I had made this one change 20 years ago, I could have saved myself a hell of a lot of headaches. And so yeah, I love that idea.
Yeah, and my business coach always calls. He says the gray tsunami is coming, and be ready for it, right?
Yeah.
And there are all these
Oh,
people,
man.
yeah, like yourself. You have all this knowledge, all this real experience. It's like, where can I give that? Where can I plug that in? And how can I really kind of, give back and create something with that? Because it's gold. It's golden.
Man, Sid, this has been so much fun, man. I could talk about boxing, and I'm sure you've got stories we didn't even talk about. We might even have to have you back, but this has been legendary, man. From Sid the Jewel Vanderpool, I can't thank you enough for being here.
Thanks, Bob. That flew by, and absolutely, man, would love to come back and chat some more.
Right on.
The Growth Mixtape podcast with Bob Mathers is produced by Bespoke Projects. Music by Je m'appelle Walter Cronkite. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to follow and rate us. When you do this, it helps to raise our podcast profile so that more people can find us. If you want to connect, you can find me on LinkedIn using the link in the show notes.